Hello everyone, welcome to Guru Dakshina. Today we are going to discuss about lambda functions in C++. Basically, lambda functions are introduced in C++ by C++ standard 11, right? So what does it mean? Before 2011, there was nothing called lambda functions in C++. By new standard, lambda functions are introduced. It's very interesting. So those who are classic C++ programmers, lambda functions are quite different. So that is the reason, means quite different, and it is a little bit confusing. That is why I thought of providing a video about lambda functions. So let's see what is lambda functions are and what is the difference between lambda functions and normal functions. So a lambda function will have a particular syntax, okay, very interesting type of syntax, and which is a little alien for normal C++ developers or classic C++ developers. Okay, so let's see the syntax. So the lambda function will have a first part which is called a capture list, and second part which is called a parameter list. Yeah, basically this part we know in a normal C++ function we used to have this parameter list, right? And third part is the body, which is again common in normal functions. So this much part we are aware of, right? So suppose if I am writing a function, a normal function in C++, we will be having void fun, then we will be having the body, right? So what I'm saying is that this much part we are aware of, the function, the parameter list and the function body. So in lambda function also we'll be having the same thing, and what is new is the capture list. Okay, so the three parts are the capture list, this is parameter list, and the function body. So it's quite easy. Function body is normal function body, parameter list is normal parameter list, like integer a, integer b, or a boolean a, or something like that, right? The parameter list. Now what we have additional here is the capture list. So capture list has something to play. Okay, so we will see what is it. So before we are discussing any further, okay, for your understanding or the basic understanding, the difference between a lambda function and a normal function is that a lambda function is an anonymous function, okay, and whereas a normal function will have a name. But in C++, lambda function has much more meaning to it. It is called a callable object. Okay, so it is something like a function pointer, just for a basic understanding. Okay, so we will see in detail about lambda function and how it is being called and all that, then you will understand what it is. But before that, let us write a basic or a simple lambda function. So as you know that I could write a function here just like that, right? Okay, so avoid fun, and I can write. So let us try to write same thing here. Okay, so minimum syntax, as I said, is this much. This much is a lambda function, but you can see that here there are some errors. Okay, so these errors, okay, so you need to write like this. Okay, so we are getting some errors for while writing a simplest lambda function. Okay, so there is some problem to write a global lambda function just like this, right? So let's see how we can overcome with that, right? The same lambda function, let me put it here, sorry. So the same lambda function, I'm putting it here. Now you can see that there is no error or warning for that. So when you are declaring something globally as a lambda function, you need to do something different so that you can have a global lambda function. It is possible you can have a global lambda function, something else is required. Let me make you clear about why that is required. Okay, so this lambda function is just like any other function, and I can have any operation here inside the curly braces, that is the function body part, right? So this, let me write it like this so that you will be able to understand this. Okay, so there is no name, because of that name is not there, whereas there is something called capture list. We will get into that later. Then the function parameter and the body, right? So here I am writing one operation. Let us make it very simple operation, see out. And in see out, what we are going to do is that, okay, my first lambda, right? And I am doing this, right? So let's okay, so what we are going to do is that we wrote a lambda function, and we wrote a statement, an output statement, which is to just print my first lambda. And let's compare it, right? So I'm just compiling and executing it. Yes, I called my function, but nothing had happened. There is no function call happened yet, right? So how to call a lambda function? If you wanted to declare and call a lambda function, what you need to do is that you assign this lambda function to a name. So let us do that. Auto lambda, I am going to call it as lambda, which is equal to my lambda function, right? Now what happened? Now what we have done is that we created a lambda function which is assigned to a name called lambda. Now if you want, wherever you want, you can call it lambda. Okay, and how to call a function? Similar way, you have to call with the parameter list. Now if you compile, okay, first we'll save it. Let's compile it and execute it. Compile it and execute it, right? So see, now you can see that the first lambda is printed. Okay, so in order to call a lambda function, what you need to do is that you need to assign it to a variable, and then you use that variable to call the lambda. Now let's come back to our global lambda, the simplest lambda that I written the very first time. So auto lambda 1 equal to this lambda, right? So now you cannot see that error as we are seeing earlier. That means what? In a global lambda, you at least you need to assign it so that only it can be used outside, right? So that is the reason why earlier we were getting those errors, right? Now if you want to call lambda 1, you can just call it from anywhere, right? As it is a global lambda, you can call it from anywhere. I do not have any operation mentioned in the lambda, because of that I will not be able to see it. Okay, let's do one thing. Let us make some statement here also. All right, so here I'm taking my global, sorry, global lambda, and this is the statement or operation that I am doing for the global lambda function. And let's compile it and execute it. See, my global lambda also got executed now, right? So right now what we have done, we have written a simple lambda function, and with a capture list, a parameter list, and a function body. So minimum thing that we need to have, minimum requirement for a lambda function is this much. As I said, this much, right? So we need to have a capture list, parameter list, and a function body. Hope this is clear. Yeah, if it is clear, then we can move further. Let us comment this. Let us not use this global lambda. Rather than that, we will be using the lambda that is written inside this function called fun. Yeah, let us make it lambda fun, right? So it makes sense, right? So let's call this function as lambda now, and yeah, so now we are going to see what is capture list and what is parameter list. Okay, so let us see what is parameter list. Okay, Then we will come to capture list because it is quite easy. So here we can say that what are the parameters that we need to pass to this lambda function. Okay, for example, I am passing integer a, integer b. Okay, so we can pass parameter to a lambda function. So if you are passing this, for example, what we will do, we will add these two numbers and return it and check it whether it is working fine or not, right? So return a plus b. So yeah, so now even if we are not mentioning the return type, it will work. Okay, that is the interesting thing about int a, int b, return statement. What is this? Why are we getting this error? Okay, okay. Okay, so that's right, because we mentioned it as a parameter. That is right. Okay, so I was wondering what happened. So let us pass 10 comma 20, right? So with the parameter only we can call, right? So that was there, right? So now we are passing two values and we are executing it. You see, it is a only writing what is the statement that we have to print this value, right? See out, we are going to print the output of the lambda, right? So we saved it. Okay, we will compile it and we will run it again. Yeah, so you can see that, you know, lambda, we can pass some parameter and we can get the output to it, right? So all this thing can be done. And you know, another thing that I mentioned, you can, in order to get more clarity, you can mention this int. It is optional. This part is optional, so normally people doesn't mention it, but it is always readable to mention the return type for the lambda, correct? So this part is also fine. Now let me introduce the capture list. Okay, suppose we are having int age, some parameter. Okay, let us make it something like salary is 100 and, or yeah, very less salary, right? Let's make it so nice salary, so 1 lakh. 100, okay, 10,000, 1 lakh, right? And I wanted to make use of that inside my lambda function. Okay, so my first lambda salary is, I'm trying to just do some operation. So salary, I am saying this as salary, right? See, but I am getting an error here. What is the error? If you are looking at the error, it is saying that we cannot access, you know, we cannot access. Okay, let's this is a function, right? So let's move it like this so that it is more clear, right? So this is a variable within this function which cannot be accessed inside a function. Got it? So you cannot access a function members inside a lambda function. So wherever it may be, okay, this variable is not accessible here. How to make it accessible? Okay, so that is what the purpose of the capture list. If you want to make use of it, then you mention it here. Now you see the error is gone and we can compile it and run it now. Okay, so now my first lambda salary is 1 lakh, right? We can print it now. If whatever be the salary, suppose I am making some change to this salary. Okay, here I am saying that salary equal to I'm going to make some change, salary plus 100,000 or another 10,000, not 100,000, right? So if I am trying to do this, so here what I am doing, I am not just using it, I am trying to modify the salary. So what happened, experiment must be a modifiable L value, means it should be a modifiable parameter. Now just I given access to this particular variable inside, but we cannot modify it. Okay, so if you wanted to modify, then we need to make some changes here. Okay, so for making that, there are number of ways. One option is that you can pass by reference, so you can say it as a address of, right? Now if I do anything here, that salary will be modified and which will be accessible outside as well. Okay, so here if you see the salary, now salary, if you see the salary, equal to salary. So if you're printing this value, so if you are printing this one, see the salary is changed here, right? Earlier it was 1 lakh, now it is 1,10,000, right? So if you wanted to make any change for the variable that you're passing, then we need to mention it as a reference. So you should pass it as an address of. Okay, so this is how you need to pass a parameter. Now if you wanted to, suppose you have 10 variables, writing these 10 variable one after another inside the capture list is difficult. In order to avoid that, we have certain shortcuts. If I mention it is as equal, that means within this lambda function, I will be able to access all the parameter that is mentioned here. For example, integer, another one, right? Increment is 10, okay, 10% or something, right? In that case, what happened is that I'm not mentioning 0. If I just only mentioning salary and plus increment, I'm trying to access it here. Increment, as you see earlier, it will give an error, right? So if I wanted to access both of this variable, what I can do is I can put an equal symbol here, so that I will be able to access all the variables which is in the particular scope can be accessed inside the lambda function. Now I don't want to access a particular value or a particular variable, or I don't want to modify. Okay, sorry. So what I was saying is this, right? Suppose if I wanted to modify salary, and whereas I wanted to access the increment. Okay, so right now we have this variable, so let us make the change like this. Okay, increment. So increment is accessible here, and making it as 10,000. Okay, so there is no error here for salary and increment to use it, but to assign that we need to make a change because we need to pass by reference. So if you wanted to access all the variable by reference, you can put ampersand. If you want to just access it, we can use equal, right? But in this particular case, I wanted to access salary, means I wanted to modify salary, whereas increment is not used for any modification. In that case, what I can use is I can say salary as a pass by reference and increment as normal. So I can type increment here, or I can even mention equal. Okay, so what happens now? Okay, sorry. So let us make this change here, equal first and increment by second parameter. Okay, so what happened is that all the variables should be accessible, in that salary should be modifiable. So what are the things we can use? We can directly say the name, so something like increment directly, increment like this, and we can pass by reference, and you can normally, if you want to just have a pass by value, then you can mention equal. but when you are doing pass by value, then you will not be able to modify any of this values, right? Any of you cannot modify any of the value that is, or any of the variable which is mentioned within the scope. Hope this is clear, right? So now let me modify this to salary so that there is no errors for us, right? So this looks fine. What else is there to discuss? Okay, yeah. So this is how basically we can make use of a capture list. In capture list we can mention any of the variable which need to be accessed either by value or by reference. And what else you can pass? You can pass by through the function parameters. You can pass various variable which can be also accessed inside. Now suppose you wanted to declare a variable integer uh, integer age. For example, I wanted to mention the integer age, so that I can do inside here, and whatever I wanted to do it, I can do all this operation, and it just like that, it works just like any other function. Okay, so this is about the capture list. Parameter list is quite easy, then again the return type is quite easy, then function body is easy. Right, now one of the challenge that I faced when I was learning lambda function. Okay, so let me write another function, maybe lambda lambda one. Okay, okay, or lambda test. Okay, so I'm writing another function called lambda test, and let's see this. Lambda test, and see. Right. Okay, so here one of the challenge that I faced, when I was learning about lambda functions. Initially, I was writing all this thing and all that. Okay, lambda function, capture list, and parameter list, return type, everything I would be able to understand. But I was thinking I wanted to make use of it in a particular way. That okay, so I have an if block. Okay, what I was trying to do is that within the if I'll write a lambda. If that lambda is returning true, execute if, right? So this is what I was trying. So let us try that. So first is capture list, next is a parameter list, then what we need is a function body, right? These many things. I was thinking that if this is returning true, okay, let me make it false. If this see return false, semicolon, right? So now what is it doing? There is a lambda function which is returning false. If this happened, if I do any operation, that will not get executed here, right? So this is what I was trying. So inside something of this sort, right? So I was trying to call this, but what happened? Okay, so we need to call the okay, so I was thinking that this lambda function will be called itself, right? And because of that, I can execute this inside if, and I will be able to get the the output, or I can do the operation whatever mentioned within the if statement. Okay, so this is what I was thinking, and I was trying to execute it, right? So let's see. See, but here it is not printing that inside if at all, right? Yes, it is writing, it is printing the inside if, right? So what's happening here? This was exactly the same problem that I was facing. Even though our lambda function is returning false, it is going inside if. Okay, that means like what I have done, I had an array of the array of boolean values. Okay, but each and every case it was printing inside it. This is what was happening with me, right? So why I'm mentioning about this is because of, I wanted to explain about lambda in a bit different way. So what happens now, I was thinking this: if this value is true, right, then then it should execute, right? Okay, now earlier we were thinking that this is true, then go inside and execute. If it is false, it should not. See, when I changed to this true equal to the lambda function. Now it is saying some error. What is the error? It is saying that it cannot be compared with a lambda which is returning boolean. So this is not actually returning a boolean value. So basically, if you would have done this, if you would have taken this lambda here, okay, let me um, declare it as auto lam equal to this, right? If I do this lam, this work fine. Now if you execute it, it will not go inside if, right? Earlier you can see that inside if it is there, but now it is not going. Okay, that means whenever we are writing lambda directly inside an if also, it will not be called by itself. So yeah, so if you want to execute that, then it need to be called. Okay, that time I was struggling how to call this lambda within an if statement. I don't want to do this, okay, because my operation is very atomic. I don't want to call, declare lambda outside then call it inside, right? So I struggled a lot to understand how to do this, right? But yeah, let me tell you how we can do that. All right, so as I said earlier, lambda is a callable object. That means what? This is something like a class. In C++, lambda is implemented in such a way that it is built as a anonymous object, but it is callable. Callable in the sense it can be called through an operator, right? Which operator? Which is the function operator. Okay, so this bracket operator is overloaded in a lambda function. So internally in C++, what happens is that an anonymous object is created, and which will be having an operator overloaded there. So what happened if you wanted to write a self-calling lambda, you have to write it like this. Now let us execute this. Yeah. So this will give the same impact as what we got earlier. See, this time also um, lambda is not called. So let us change it into true now. True. And let's execute it. See, now it's supposed to call the if. Right, inside if. Now you remove this part, right? It's not required. If it is true, then we can call this lambda and it will be inside if. So why okay, so that is how we will be able to call or write a self callable lambda function with parameter. Suppose if it is taking a parameter, for example, okay, bool item. Okay, if you are mentioning whole item, and if you are passing item here return item, and then while calling you have to pass the item value, right? Either true or false, right? So all this thing can be done as we discussed earlier. All that you can experiment yourself. See, inside if it is false, it will not go inside the if. Yeah, so one more thing I wanted to tell you earlier, why earlier it was always going inside if. Yeah, because it is an object, callable object. The callable object is already created, right? So whenever we are saying we are using if is always comparing with 0 and 1, right? It is non-zero value, right? So because of that, always if was getting executed. Okay, so that is the reason why always it was going inside if. Okay, now what is happening is that, this callable, what we are doing is that we are calling the callable object with the value. So this is returning a boolean, right? So it is returning a boolean. Hence what's happening is that that return value is compiled and it is going inside the if, or it will not, right? So that is what happening. So now you can do a lot of operation with um, lambda functions. You know why lambda function is very useful? Lambda function is very useful where you wanted to uh, use some function that is only in some specific places, and you don't want to use it anywhere else, and anybody else also should not be able to use it, right? Then this can be done by a simple function, but we can simplify that. The amount of code need to be written is very less and unnecessary. We need to write some function outside, or it is only an atomic operation, then you don't need to write it as a part of the class and all that. Then you can go for lambda functions, and lambda functions are extensively used as the part of STL algorithms. Okay, so that also you can see. So this is all about lambda. I wanted to say, if you have any questions or queries, please feel free to ask me. I would be in a position to help you all. Yeah, thanks for watching. Bye bye.